Let's just jump right into it, guys. Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the mind of a guy whose life was, well, it was basically a brilliant, completely contradictory masterclass in Stoic philosophy. We're talking about the one and only Lucius Annaeus Seneca. We're going to be using his famous Letters from a Stoic as our roadmap to pull out some incredibly practical, timeless advice from a messenger who, as you'll see, was just as deeply flawed as he was undeniably brilliant.
To really get to philosophy, you absolutely have to understand the man behind it. Born around 4 BC in Córdoba, Spain, Seneca actually suffered from horrific health for most of his life. We're talking chronic asthma and probably tuberculosis. But despite that, he climbed to the absolute heights of power in the Roman Empire. He was a statesman, a hit playwright, and, most famously, the tutor and unofficial right-hand man to the infamous Emperor Nero. I mean, for the first 5 years of Nero's reign, Seneca was essentially running the entire Roman world.
But here's where we hit this stark, honestly kind of comical paradox in his life. On one hand, you've got his incredibly high philosophical ideals, right? He's denouncing tyranny, he's warning against the toxic nature of flattery, and he's preaching the beauty of a simple, unextravagant life. But on the other hand, look at his actual reality. He's literally serving a tyrant in Nero. He's writing absolute groveling flattery from exile just to get back into Rome's good graces, and he amassed a personal fortune of 300 million sesterces. To put that into perspective, the guy owned an absurd collection of 500 identical citruswood tables. His critics obviously called out this massive hypocrisy nonstop. But honestly, it's probably exactly this messy, human frailty that makes his advice hit so hard today.
So, here's our game plan for today. We just covered our contradictory Stoics, and next we're going to look at a more human philosophy, navigating society and friendship, practicing poverty and adversity, and finally, facing time and death.
Okay, part 1, a more human philosophy, and how to actually adapt Stoicism for real life.
You see, before Seneca came along, Greek Stoicism could feel, honestly, a bit cold and dogmatic. It focused on this fictional, flawless, wise man who had achieved sudden, absolute perfection and literally felt zero emotion. Seneca's absolute biggest contribution was taking that rigid framework and molding it into a compassionate, human practice that everyday Romans could actually use. He taught that the ultimate goal of life, the summum bonum, which combines wisdom, courage, self-control, and justice, wasn't about waking up one day and being perfect. No, it's a gradual daily grind. It's about building up your armor against the blows of fortune, all while admitting, hey, we're all flawed humans here, just trying to get a little bit better.
And we really see this practical, down-to-earth approach in his rules for reading. Seneca actually warns us against what we would call today information overload. I mean, think about having 50 browser tabs open at once, or mindlessly doom scrolling. If you're constantly skipping from author to author, you end up absorbing absolutely nothing. He compares it to a patient who keeps switching up their medications. The wound is never actually going to heal. Instead, he tells us to stick with well-tried authors, and, this is absolutely crucial, to extract and fully digest just one useful thought a day to help you face poverty or death or whatever life throws at you.
In fact, right after he gives this advice to his friend Lucilius, Seneca actually practices what he preaches. He borrows a daily thought from a rival philosophical camp, the Epicureans, and it brings us to a massive question. So what is the actual proper limit to a person's wealth?
His answer totally nails his brilliant pointed style. He says, first, having what is essential, and second, having what is enough. He's reminding us that it literally doesn't matter how much cash is locked away in your safe if you're constantly obsessing over what someone else has. True poverty isn't about having too little. It is that constant, insatiable hankering for more. It's a total psychological trap, and man, does that feel incredibly relevant in our modern culture of endless consumerism.
Let's move right into part 2, navigating society and friendship and protecting your peace.
Seneca issues a very stark warning here. Avoid the mass crowd. He straight up tells his friend that nothing ruins your character faster than hanging out in large groups because the mob mentality lets vices just creep right into your soul with zero resistance. He gives this chilling example of going to the midday gladiatorial games. He went in expecting some light, casual entertainment, and instead he found pure, unarmored butchery, with the crowd literally screaming for blood. He argues that just being around that kind of mob makes the person crueler and less humane. When your mind is impressionable, adopting the toxicity of the majority is terrifyingly easy. Think about the outrage machine of modern social media. Because of that, he says you need to retire into yourself and only hang around people who are actually going to make you better.
But what about individuals, right? What about our actual friends? Well, Seneca warns against two huge extremes here, trusting everyone and trusting no one. Both of these are major faults. You definitely shouldn't be spilling your deepest secrets to some random stranger, but you also shouldn't be so paranoid that you hide everything from your closest confidants. The sweet spot is this. You judge a person very carefully before you decide to make them your friend. But once you do let them in, you trust them completely. You speak with them as unreservedly as you would speak to yourself. Now you might be wondering, why even seek out friends if a Stoic is supposed to be completely self-sufficient? Seneca argues that true friendship should never ever be a business transaction. If you're only making a friend so they can come visit you when you're sick or, bail you out of a jam, that person is going to run for the hills the second actual trouble strikes. True friendship is cultivated for its own sake. It's about genuine affection. He quotes a beautiful love potion from Hecate that requires 0 herbs or magic spells. If you wish to be loved, love.
All right, part 3, practicing poverty and adversity, because preparing for the absolute worst is basically a core Stoic discipline.
For Seneca, Stoicism isn't just some intellectual theory you read about. It requires active, physical rehearsal, especially when your life is going great. During times of massive festive excess, like the Roman Saturnalia or, our modern holidays, Seneca actually advises a literal practice run of poverty. He tells us to block out a few days to eat hard, plain bread, wear the roughest clothes, and sleep on a genuinely uncomfortable pallet. And this isn't just cosplay. It has to be a real trial. The whole point is to sit there and ask yourself this one powerful question. Is this what one used to dread? You're essentially using a dummy target to train your brain, so you no longer panic at the thought of a sudden change in fortune. By willingly making yourself at home with next to nothing for a few days, you start to realize that what nature actually demands from us is incredibly small. There's this massive, liberating freedom in discovering firsthand that you don't actually need luxury or status or excess just to survive and be deeply content. Like he says, a cheerful poverty truly is an honorable state.
Which brings us to this mind-bending Stoic paradox. The shortest route to wealth is the contempt of wealth. True security absolutely does not come from hoarding riches. Remember, Seneca's own immense wealth made him a huge target for his political enemies, and it made him incredibly paranoid. True security comes from the realization that you can be perfectly fine without it. If you shape your life according to nature, you'll never truly be poor. But if you shape it according to the opinions of everyone else, you'll never be rich.
Finally, part 4, facing time and death. The ultimate final exam of being human.
As Seneca got older, his massive influence over Emperor Nero completely crumbled. His former student became incredibly erratic and murderous, and Seneca suddenly found himself in very real mortal danger. At one point, he even tried to give away his entire fortune just to survive. Living under this constant, heavy shadow during his twilight years, his letters naturally pivoted to our greatest human fear. He believed that the only way to unlearn being a slave to the fear of death was to completely surrender to philosophy. True freedom literally demands it.
He tells his friend Lucilius that the best way to leave this life isn't necessarily a sudden exit, but a gentle dissolution. Rather than living in dread of the end, we should treat every single day as if it's the one that completely rounds out our lives. Seneca actually talks about a Roman official who would literally celebrate his own funeral every single night with wine and chanting. Now, Seneca says we should do this honorably, going to bed each night able to truly say, I have lived. Because if you do that, waking up the next morning isn't something you just expect. It feels like this joyful, incredible windfall.
And this beautifully wraps up his concept of rehearsing death. Because we have absolutely no idea where death is waiting for us, we have to expect it everywhere. Seneca points out that all our fancy words, our big philosophical debates, and our defiant stances against bad luck, a lot of that might just be pure pretense. It's only at the very end, when all the tricks and disguises are finally stripped away, that death acts as the ultimate judge of our true spiritual progress. So rehearsing death isn't some morbid, depressing exercise. It is literally rehearsing for absolute freedom.
In the year 65 AD, after a failed conspiracy against Nero, Seneca was officially ordered to commit suicide. It was a fate he met by his own hand, testing every single ounce of his philosophy in the most absolute, final way imaginable. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought to measure your own life against right now. If all your disguises were stripped away at this very second, are you truly ready to say, I have lived? Take that thought with you today, guys. Catch you in the next one.